Check. Yeah. Okay. Good morning. My name is the same name that's up on the stage. The topic for today is the same thing that's up on stage. How many of you are excited looking at that? None of the medical students or none of the medicos will be excited, okay? They're saying 6 days in the week we've listened to medical terminology. We come to youth expecting something new. And of all the things, Sudha chooses somebody who is going to talk on therapeutic vacuum. How many of you are excited about it? How many of you I would just say, okay, can we just stop and go? How many of you don't know how to express yourself? Some of you are wearing masks, it's really difficult to make out. Okay, so I don't speak very often with youth and students, but when I do, I try to choose a word or terminology that will stick to your mind. I'm not going to talk about diagnostics and prognostics and whatever. There's no randomized controlled trials. But I like to at least have one or two terms that will stick to your mind, which you probably have not heard before. Sometimes it's a word I make up on my own. This is not something I've made up on my own. So can all of you try to pronounce what's written on the slide? All of you okay with that? Therapeutic? Okay. I'll give you 2 minutes to guess what that means. So the engineering students are saying there used to be a time when there used to be this thing called vacuum diodes. Any of you heard that? From VIT, vacuum diodes? That's what it's called. So something to do with that? Just take a wild guess, at least one guess. It can be crazy, you can get it right. You'll get a chocolate. Any more chocolates left? I've got one in my pocket. One guess, one guess. Nobody wants to guess. You can make a team guess. This looks like a quiz team, doesn't it? Okay, yeah. So next slide. I'm sorry, I was making a lecture, but this is the next slide, okay? Go through this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I attended a workshop on, what's that workshop that we attended? Medical education, how to make it optimal. And they said this is how you start off a lecture. Aims and objectives of the lecture. You should mention clearly to the participants or the students what they're going to learn in the next 20 minutes. Okay? Last one is quite attractive, isn't it? Hashtag therapeutic vacuum. Let's make it go viral on social media. How many more slides do you think I have? That's it. Okay. So I'm not going to speak on slides. I'm going to speak from notes that I've written on my phone. Shall we just start with a word of prayer? Loving Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this little time, Lord. As we talk about exciting things that you can do for us, Lord. As we talk about things that can make us go, in the middle of studies and other things, Lord. We just pray, Lord, that during this next 15-20 minutes, you'll speak to us. You'll make us aware of needs that we ourselves sometimes may not know, Lord. In your most precious name we pray. Amen. Slide changer goes off. Probably just leave it at this. Okay. Now, I'll tell you a typical scenario where therapeutic vacuum is manifested. Okay. So, I'm a doctor. I work in an intensive care unit. A lot of you will be, I heard half the anesthetists in CMC are here. I don't know who's running the anesthetic department. If any of you have difficulty sleeping, they help you quite a bit. Okay. So typically, I get called at 2 o'clock in the night, 2 a.m. and they said, Dr. Benji, this baby, I work with newborn babies. They said, this baby is looking really unwell. Is very sick. We don't even think if this baby will survive. So I start off at 2 o'clock. We are in ICU 2:15. I've got a great team, a couple of registrars, very good set of nurses, and we all work together 3:30 in the morning, and things start settling down. So we've we've given medicines, we've given injections, we put the baby on multiple drips and lines, what we call. We put the baby on a ventilator machine, a lot of gases going into the baby, some 3-4 monitors up with the baby. And finally, everything looks good. Saturations are good, oxygen levels are good, the blood pressure is normal, and we all take a deep breath. Okay, 1.5 hours we've run on adrenaline, everything happening, okay. And then 3 o'clock we say, yes, we've done everything, baby is stabilized, let's see what happens in the next 1 hour. 3:45, I usually go to the office and wait for a half an hour or 1 hour just at that time. 3:45, I get a call saying, Dr. Benji, I don't know what happened. The baby's collapsed again. The baby's collapsed again. Okay. So that is therapeutic vacuum. A very vulnerable period in a team of doctors here, where you've intensely worked for a few hours or even a few minutes. I learned this term in Australia when we were part of a retrieval service. So we used to go out in ambulances from hospital to hospital, or even roadside accidents and things. We used to be the first responders. And they said, you do everything in 15, 20 minutes, and then you're getting ready to leave, and you drop your guard. And that's when the patient collapses, and you pick it up too late. Okay. You get what I mean? You don't need to be a doctor to understand that. You've done something intensely for a few weeks, a few months, and you've achieved it. You've got stability. You think everything's going to be good. And then, after a few days or a few months, you're down again. Okay? Makes sense to you? Okay. Tell me some incidents in the Bible where there was therapeutic vacuum and something happened. Bible, once in a while we'll read it. Maybe more than once.
Moses leading the Israelites, but him not being able to see the promised land.
You have a point, but I wouldn't concentrate on Moses not seeing the promised land. What happened to the Israelites when they were led out of Egypt? What happened before, during that time? Years of slavery, intense hard work. And then Moses comes and says, I'm going to deliver you through God. What happens that week or more than a week? Plagues. They almost get released by Pharaoh. They get called back. They're almost there. And then finally Pharaoh says, go. And what happens after that? They're going through the desert. And then the Egyptians are chasing them. Intense, isn't it? It's like an intensive care unit. And then they come across this thing called the Red Sea. And what happens? There's something supernatural that happens. It parts and they go through. The Egyptians get flooded again. They die. And they're released into what they know is the promised land. And there's a period of therapeutic vacuum for about 40 years when they're in the wilderness and they lose it. And they literally lose it. They lose their faith in God, who has actually taken them over these 40 years. That's what happens. And then through a series of events, God actually takes them to the promised land. I won't be talking about that. Okay. So, next scenario. Remember the disciples after the Last Supper? Intense period of 3 or 4 years of mentorship, leading. They're with Jesus. They've seen miracles. They've done everything. They know that Jesus is going to go to the cross and die. They know it's been foretold before. And then they have this time with Jesus when he actually tells them the time has come. And then Jesus goes alone to pray. You'd be thinking the disciples are working out ways to avoid this or do something. But what do? They sleep. They sleep, and Jesus is actually not very happy with that. It wasn't a spiritual sleep that they had. Okay? And you look at it after that, when Jesus died on the cross, intense period again, they knew it was foretold. There's a lot of things that happened. John, Mary, the kings, the soldiers, a lot of things go. And when Jesus is buried in the tomb, what happens to the disciples? They go back to fishing. That's the therapeutic vacuum. A period of intense experience that is very, very positive, followed by a period when you let everything go. Typically, I was meeting a few of the medical students at an interview, and one of them said, I was trying to get in. I went for NEET coaching. It may be something else for a lot of you who are not in the medical side. I went for NEET coaching. I failed. I tried again. Then my parents said, why don't you try something else? But no, I wanted to get in, and I wanted to get into CMC. And then this judgment came, this postponement came. I kept trying. I prayed. I lost faith in God. I came back again. And now I've got into CMC. Sir, I feel nothing. I've got into CMC after 4 years of trying, and I feel nothing. I don't feel the joy. That is a vulnerable period. That is where therapeutic vacuum hits you, and you lose sight of yourself backsliding and going down. And many other incidents. In fact, Jesus' life was half the time a potential therapeutic vacuum. Fetus Jesus in Mary's womb. She's going on a donkey, and Jesus is getting shaken all over the place. lot of prophecies about him, and he's inside. And then he goes there, and then Mary goes into labor. Look at what happens over the next few days. He pops out expecting to be in a royal kingdom. He sees like, man, one sheep there, one cow there, he's there. And then suddenly these fellows are coming with gold, silver, and myrrh. And then there's these shepherds that come in. He's totally excited about it. And in the new version, there's also a little drummer boy who comes and plays. I don't think that's there in the original version of the Bible. Exciting things that happen. And then suddenly there's the people who come and say, the angels who come and say, you have to flee to Egypt. All this happens within the first month or two. They're running to Egypt. What happens after that, next 30 years? Other than probably the incident of when he was 12 years old at the temple, there's nothing much that is actually happening in Jesus' life. It looks like that, isn't it? He probably had a normal childhood. Probably was playing cricket in the gullies of Bethlehem. We don't know. Entire first 30 years, there was a therapeutic vacuum. And then Mary does something at a wedding in Cana. And then, has Jesus lost it? No. He fulfills the very purpose for which he was sent to earth. Even though there was a long period of nothingness in his life, he fulfills the very purpose that Jesus had in his life, that God had in his life. Okay? We always talk about hills and valleys experience, highs and lows. Should life really be that way? Yesterday we went for a retreat with the dental department. You always feel that we went to Yelagiri, so it was a hills experience. You always feel that after every hills experience, there needs to be a valley. Life doesn't need to be that way. There may be a valley, but that valley is not a time when you're going to let things go. Okay? So I'm going to talk to you about 4 points. Why does therapeutic vacuum happen? I'm going to give you 5 solutions to it. Okay? Very quickly. We'll probably finish in 10 minutes. Why do you have therapeutic vacuum? Now, all of you are in situations when you've worked hard, you've done an exam, you probably got into college and things like that. And then you feel you can relax. The popular saying is, an empty mind is the devil's workshop. So when you've achieved a lot, done a lot, worked hard, you worked for carnival, you worked for some event, and after that, there is nothingness. An empty mind is the devil's workshop. The Bible clearly acknowledges that. If you look at 1 Peter 5:8, what does it say? It actually says, be alert and sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion ready to devour you, looking for someone to devour. So when you're in that period when something has happened, sometimes it happens during vacation. You work for 6 months in CMC and then you go back home, you forget that the devil is actually waiting to devour you. He's not just tempting you and all, he's waiting to devour you. Devour means, he wants to actually make you pieces. Okay? Bible acknowledges that. Second thing is, there is so much evil around you every day. So much bad things around you every day. Now look at the news. How many of you read the newspaper today? Newspaper, what is that? You still have it nowadays. How many of you read the news today? Anything last 1 week? Or let's say, all of you guys are in hostel, right? You're walking around hostel. How much of news is actually, this is great, this is such a positive thing that happened? How many of your hostel interactions are, we should do something positive to the community around you? We should all sit and study and be fantastic doctors. How many percent of your interactions are actually that? Very little. You look at the newspaper, it's full of evil. It's not, this person got raped, this person got beaten up. Cricket happened and this fellow was sledging the other fellow. The world is filled with negativity and evil. And when have you heard of osmosis? Osmosis, what is osmosis? So when there's so much of bad around you, even if you try to keep yourself poor, the natural drift is for the bad to come in. So there's not much of good out there. You need to actually find places to find good things. Okay, so there's a lot of evil out there. It's quite similar to the first point. I'll read to you from Psalm 56. Okay. Be merciful to me, my God, for my enemies are in hot pursuit. All day long they press their attack. My adversaries pursue me all day long. In their pride, many are attacking me. The Bible again acknowledges that, knowing that you're in a world where people are attacking you. Okay. The third and fourth point, Your own pride. You've achieved something, you've got into college, you've done an exam, you've won something, and your own pride gets into it. In fact, some people take pride in the fact that they're humble. Even that humility is a source of pride. Some of you are, all of you, which place is VIT in the top 100 colleges of India? How many of you from VIT here? Yeah? Yeah, so it's all within the top 10, top 20. There are years when it's been in the top 10. CMC? One number, two number, three number. Fourth number means there is an administrative meeting. Why did CMC slip to the fourth place? Okay. How many of you, when you got into college, were told that you've got into a prestigious college by your own efforts? Okay. Wow. Okay. So that pride gets to you. Okay. I'll go on to the fourth point. Pride has many faces and facets. Okay. It's not always saying, I did this. It's sometimes, pride hits you humbly. I'm not going to dwell on that, but you don't realize you're proud. Sudha asked me on Wednesday to see if I could speak to the youth. I could say, oh, I'm such a great speaker. That's why Sudha called me. I can connect with youth and all. More likely that she called 4 or 5 other people. They said, no, so okay, no other go, let's call Benji. Okay. There's always a backstory to you getting into college, to you achieving something. Always somebody you need to acknowledge. Okay, the last point is the world will ridicule you. The world will ridicule you if you try to stay focused on doing good and doing right in God's sight. Okay. How many of you have never been ridiculed for being for being a Christian, or coming to Sunday school, or coming to church? How many of you have never ever been ridiculed, or some fellow saying something sly? Most of you have faced that, isn't it? And for some people that breaks them. When somebody says, why do you want to go to church? The science is more than enough to explain everything. You are a fool to believe in the Bible. For some people that breaks them. And they don't want to come there. Okay? So the world will ridicule you, but you need to stay stronger than that. Okay, so 4 points. Why does the therapeutic vacuum happen? Empty mind is the devil's workshop. There's a lot of evil around you. There's your own pride, and the world will ridicule you. Okay. Now I'm going to end with 4 points that will tell you how to manipulate around this therapeutic vacuum. Okay. The first point is, I told you it's the devil who's your enemy. So you need to be aware of the devil and his plans for you and his tactics. How do you do that? Is it written anywhere? Did you take the newspaper and say, ways to tackle the devil? Ever seen a newspaper like that? How do you do that? Every one of Satan's plan is written in the Bible. And sometimes it's using people. You look at David's life. In Kagidapatra campus, we're looking at Asa's life, King Asa's life. First time I'm actually reading through the history of Asa quite in detail. You look at that and you say, that's happening to me. That's happening to me. You look at that and you realize this is how the devil is going to attack me. Be prepared. Be prepared for that. Reading the Bible. Read through the Bible like nothing else. Read through every word, even if it is genealogy. That is, every verse can speak to you. And every verse will remind you that this is one of the weapons that Satan actually uses on you. The second is, do not just exist in life. Live. I think it's this book called To Serve with Love. There's a line which says, anybody can exist dragging his soul behind him like a worn out coat. Anybody can exist. But what does the Bible say? Any Bible verse that talks about life? Lot of verses. My favorite is this. It was something that Samuel uncle actually expressively taught us when we were trying to learn some memory verses in church. Okay, what does it say? John 10:10. I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. When you have that abundant life in you, even periods of nothingness will be exciting. You're not going to fall. Okay. And 2 things I want to say is, never find God boring. God will always do exciting things for you. Never find God boring. And never stop getting fascinated like a little child. When you look at the sunrise there in the morning when you come to church, don't say, Macha, another sunrise. Okay? God put it up there for you. Never stop getting fascinated by God. The third point I tell you is fill your mind. What is empty can get filled with anything. So fill your mind. I love this verse in Philippians 4:8. One of the versions, it actually says fill your mind. Here what it says is, finally, brethren and sisters, it talks about think on these things. Some versions I told you will say fill your mind with. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these. Okay. One tip that I'll tell you to think about these things is, and I found it quite useful in college, is to actually have physical reminders of these things, Bible verses and other things, in my room. Because in the quietness of your room or in the quietness of your phone, when sin is tempting you, sometimes having a Bible verse as your screensaver is the only thing between you and sin. Some of you may get it, some of you may not get it. Some of you who've been there will understand it. Sometimes you'll say, I'm seeing that Bible verse, I think I should not go on further. Okay? Physical reminders are one useful tip for you to kind of fill your mind. The last point I want to tell you is lift your standards. The Bible clearly says, do not conform to the standards of the world. If you look at the fruits of the Spirit, it's not as easy as it sounds for somebody of the world. In fact, what does Colossians 3 say? Okay, yeah. So lift your standards by setting your mind on things above. Okay. Everywhere in hostel, they'll tell you set your mind on things below. One way or the other, directly or indirectly, whether you're doing a project or a play, set your mind, this is enough, but set your mind on things above. That's what it means to be in the world, but not of it. So you're in the period of vacuum, but you're not going to let it overcome. Is there a magic bullet that will help you end this therapeutic vacuum? Any magic bullet? How many of you listen to great philosophers, great speakers, TED Talks, motivational speeches? Ever found an answer to that? I haven't. There's only one magic bullet if at all you want it, and that is a deep personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Okay. The world will tell you, no, that's stupidity, that you don't need that in the world anymore. I'll tell you, the only way to overcome therapeutic vacuum, get bogged down, is a deep, personal, one-on-one relationship with Jesus. Okay. And through the next 5 years or 3 years, 4 years, wherever you're in college, think about that. The world will tell you a lot of ways to overcome it, but I'm telling you that it won't. Only Jesus can give you the strength. See, this age group of about 15 to 25 is very, very important. It molds a lot of what you're going to be when you're like me, 40 or 45 years old. Okay. When I picked up bad language in college or at least school, I'm still struggling with it in my mind. Okay. The way I looked at my parents when I was 15 to 25 years old molds a lot of how I treat my mom now. Okay. The kind of friends that I loved having at that age are the same ones who make the biggest impact on me now at 45 years old. 15 to 45 is no joke. 15 to 25 is no joke. So 15 to 30, that's the age group that, I think a lot of your values are permanentified, if there's a word like that. Okay, very important. So don't sit in that age group with your life in a therapeutic vacuum, achieving something and then letting it all go. I think that's all that I'll have to say for now. So the new word that you learned today is therapeutic vacuum. So think about it, identify it. I know this week is going to be a therapeutic vacuum for me because last week was very busy, had some really good experience. I've been to a retreat, I've spoken in youth, and I know that the next few days something is going to happen. I'm already alert for it. Something will happen. I know the way Satan works. Next week something is going to happen. Something, he's scheming something. Okay, so next week when you meet me, you ask me, Benji sir, therapeutic vacuum landa veliye vandacha. Okay, how is your therapeutic vacuum experience in the next 1 week? Okay. Any questions? 2 minutes for quick questions and then we'll end it. Or 3 minutes. Or personal experiences. Or anything from the Bible that amplifies this. The points I've told you are very, very simple. I just added a nice word to it so that you can think of it again. I don't expect even one post on Instagram with hashtag therapeutic vacuum after this talk, because it's a very difficult thing to post about. That those slides are just to get your attention so that you know that something exciting is coming up.
So I just want to, when you said that thing about uh, having a deep personal relationship with God, it's just something that I thought of because one of my friends, he actually asked me, he was reading through the Bible and he asked me to explain one verse that actually even I never understood. So it was the first time I actually read that parable fully. And it's, strangely enough, it's actually a sequence of parables that comes almost 1 or 2 chapters before Palm Sunday. And I've been in labor room, so I actually didn't know today was Palm Sunday when I came. So it was like a very nice continuation for me. But what it was the parable of uh, the the wedding feast. And basically, what happens is uh, there's a king who has friends, and he invites the friends to the wedding feast of his son. And all of them are busy. They say, I have a wife, or I have a new ox, or I have some farming to do. And they reject him. And that makes the king very angry. And he sends more messengers to them and tells them to come back because I've prepared this, my calves, basically, he's prepared a good feast. Okay, and they reject him again, and that makes him very angry. And this is essentially God talking about how Israel has rejected him despite him sending his servants. And then God says, God sends his troops to literally slaughter all of them, which we know is what happens to the Jews. And then uh, God then asks them to, God then sends more servants, and he says, the king says, go out onto the streets and invite everyone. And so the servants go out and they invite everyone, and the Bible specifically says both the good and the bad. And that's essentially people who think that they're righteous and people who think they're like really sinful. And these two ideas, the ideas of Jews rejecting God and the idea of the kingdom of heaven being open to good and bad, is actually both echoed in the previous two parables, which is the parable of the two sons and the parable of, I think, the tenants. I'm not sure. But essentially, and it re-echoes this in this third parable. And then finally, the king invites all these people to the feast, and he comes in and he sees one man who's not in wedding garments. And he says, friend, how can you be here without wedding garments? And uh, and because that person is not in wedding garments, he orders his slaves, his servants, to cast him out, essentially into hell, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, and put him to death. And after that is one verse which says, for many are invited, but only few are chosen. And my friend who was reading the Bible just basically texted me and said, what does this mean? And like, I had absolutely no clue. But the only thing that I could think of that I thought was useful was essentially the way these three parables I saw Jesus saying it was like warnings. The first time he warns people in general who feel like they're better than prostitutes or murderers or rapists, that is not what gets you to heaven. That's the parable of the two sons, both the good and the bad. They're all invited to the kingdom of heaven. The second one is about the Jews, how they reject God. That's the parable of the tenants. Okay, and how because of that, essentially the gospel and their inheritance is open to all of us. The third, the only thing I could think of is that it's a warning to those of us who hear the gospel, because if all you get is an invitation, there is no way you can possibly know that you should wear a certain clothing to the feast, that there is a certain preparation you have to do for the feast, unless you actually know the king. Okay, and that was something that stood out to me because it's something that it actually terrified me, because I think like I know a bit of the Bible, but it terrified me that because it doesn't matter if you know the Bible, like unless you actually know God personally, you won't know to be prepared on that day. You won't know what preparation it is. And when we come to the feast, there will be many who say, Lord, Lord, but Jesus will say, I never knew you. So that's something I just want to say. Like, the thing about having a deep personal experience, it's not just, I mean, for me, for a very long time, it was just something like elder people used to say, and my mom used to say a lot, and I never really understood it. But I don't know, this made it very real to me. So.
Anybody, anything else? See, one of the visions of this church when Uncle and Auntie started it, it was for students. And recently, a preacher who came, I think, from Malaysia or Singapore a few years ago, he said this, he was talking about the worship team and also probably the youth. He said, I see fire, which is this church, and sparks from that fire coming and lighting other fires around. And he said that was the vision that he had when he talked about the youth and the worship team that particular week. So a lot of people here are students, and we know that's a period that when a lot of people slip away. And the aim of the church is to provide a home, not just a church, provide a home to encourage all of you to stay and have a personal relationship with God. Some of you may have already had that experience, some of you may not have, some of you are exploring, come along because there's a friend. But we always want to be there to come just as you are and experience God and draw closer to Him. Now, one of the questions that we thought we'll answer is, how would you like to be a part of our church? There are quite a few options for you. So is it okay? I'll just use this time to, Sudha was saying we should mention that there are options more than just attending church. So we are online and offline. Online when internet works, offline when internet doesn't work. So that's how we are. But you'll realize very soon that we are more like a home fellowship. Okay. And most of us who actually get up are because we are available and we have a calling to do that. Okay, whether it's worshiping, preaching, or whether it's intercessory prayer, or whether it is carrying the mics around, or whether it's the little kids who take the communion, it's a calling that brings us here. Okay, and we want to urge you, like I told you, 15, 25, 30 years, urge you to find that calling. Okay, which means that, for example, the worship team is always looking for people we don't have a fixed worship team. Okay, we don't have a band that plays for the church. I put my hand up and tell Gladdy, can I lead worship on 26th April because I'm there? And Gladwin will say yes. You can do that too. Okay. If you feel it's a calling, obviously we'd like to mentor you before you take that kind of stand. But if you say, see, I want to sing along because I used to sing as a little child. I used to sing in the bathroom. That's okay. You can still join us. So if you want to be part of the worship team in any capacity, whether it is to sing along, play an instrument, and you could say, I saw a nice cajon there, nobody was playing it today, you can just tell us. Okay? We want you to be a little bit more serious than just use your musical talent. So meet one of us, Gladwin, Arpud, me, Kenny, if he's around, and we will help you become part of the worship team. There are people who have come here with music talent, who've helped out, led worship, and have gone back to their home churches, and their parents have been super thrilled with them. My son, my daughter is actually leading worship. Okay, we want you to experience that joy. We also have a lot of technical trouble there. See, I'm a neonatologist. Okay, I'm a doctor. I look after babies. I have to sit behind that computer and use OB.